All right, let's switch our focus. We do have a fair bit to talk about. This might be a long podcast, but who cares? We're talking NBA. We're talking fantasy basketball. We're talking fantasy playoffs. Now, most teams will, or most leagues, sorry, should be going into their fantasy playoffs. I know our fantasy playoffs start next week. If they're not starting next week, they're probably starting the week after. So over the coming podcasts in a few weeks, we're going to be previewing some schedules, some streaming targets to help you win your playoffs. But before we get into the specific week-to-week sort of previews, just want to give some general advice for those in head-to-head leagues coming into their playoffs. Maybe it's your first time in playoffs, or maybe you're just looking for a little bit of extra sort of things to think about going into your matchup. So first of all, Cal, I'll throw it over to you. Do you have just some general tips or advice going into playoffs?
Going in the playoffs, the one thing you have to do is, now I understand some people coast during the regular season. I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
But if you make the playoffs, you have to turn on. You have to use all of the ads that you have, all of the guys in the waiver wire. Every day you need to be on top of it. Who's playing? Who's not playing? Just pick up guys those extra stats. If you're getting a bit close in the category and you're getting close on steals, look for a guy in steals, pick them up. You have to use, in our league, it's 4 ads a week on a weekly format, and you have to go all in and use everything to your advantage.
Yeah. So obviously I think 4 is the standard in terms of ads. If you've got unlimited ads, you should be adding 2 or 3 players literally every day. If you do have that limit, which most leagues do, and we're going to get into this sooner, it's about being strategic about when you add the player so you can get the most amount of games out of them. Looking at things like back-to-backs, looking at things like how many players you have rostered and are playing on each day. If you've got 12 players playing on one day, there's no point adding someone because you're not going to put them on your starting roster. So being smart about those ads is very important. So good tip there, Cal. My next tip is, as soon as you know who your opponent is, and you might know already, you might be locked in, there might be a few things to go down this weekend, but as soon as you do know who your opponent is, go back and look at their last 2 or 3 weeks, look at their stats, look at what they've averaged, look at the last time you versed them, and try to identify which stats are going to be the closest in your matchup. So, say you're a punt blocks team, and you're going up against a strong field goal percentage team, and your field goal percentage is pretty shit. You're not going to worry about trying to stream in blocks. You're going to lose that category. Don't waste your time. But, potentially your rebounds might be close, or your steals might be close. So identify those stats where you can maximize the benefit and stream ads as much as possible, because that's really going to be the difference maker. And if you can do it earlier, before the matchup even starts, those first ads are going to be much more important, and you're not going to have to wait till the last day to sort of add 2 or 3 players at the very end, because you're going to be able to maximize those games played. So do that as soon as you know your matchup. Got another tip for us here, Cal?
I reckon that's a great one. The first thing you should do is look at your matchup and literally just go to your history of when you versed them. Pretty much as you touched on. I think it's pretty critical. And as you said, the last couple of weeks, because obviously teams are changing with injuries and COVID. My team, say 6 weeks ago, could be slightly different to how it's performing now. So definitely have a look at the most recent couple of weeks, just like you touched on there.
Yeah, for sure. I think to follow on my other point, you've got to stream aggressively and early. I think I touched on it a bit there as well. Like some teams will sort of hold a couple of ads, or 2 or 3 ads, to that last weekend and just hit the players at the end and try to get that last little boost. My philosophy is a bit different. I want to use 3 of my ads before the last weekend so I can get the most out of those games played. And then maybe keep 1 in sort of reserve for that last day or 2. So if you do find that things are close, you can add the best player possible. But I'm of the mindset, use them early, get ahead of the opponent, and maybe you sort of blow them out early on, and you can save 1 for your next matchup. Who knows? Another tip would also be just to be aware of the schedule. And we're going to get touching into this. So we're going to go heavy into the schedule for the first week of the playoffs. But know what teams have back-to-backs. Things like back-to-backs are really important for players who are resting. Some players might be resting, and another player is going to get a good boost and going to be a great sort of stream target for that day. And then there might be a drop target the next day. Be on top of the news, so know who's injured, and then who gets value from those injuries. And another little tip for you: follow us on Twitter, because we'll be tweeting out some content and letting you know if there is an injury, who's going to be the ad, who's going to be the player that benefits the most. So there's a big tip. Follow us on Twitter, Ball Boys NBA. And yeah, don't be afraid to drop injured players would be another thing. We've got a lot of injuries going on at the moment, and it's the pointy end of the season. If you have someone like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, look, he's a great player. Sure, he's one of your best players, but if you're in a battle for playoffs, trying to get into the playoffs or to win the playoff, you got to drop a player like that, because you've got to have healthy bodies. It doesn't matter if he comes good in a week or two and someone else adds him. It doesn't matter. You've got to win that play that week right then and there. Any comments on some of those tips there, Cal?
Yeah, like I just had to drop Malik Beasley. He's out for 4 weeks, so there's no point having him now. He's done. Bring someone else in. Hopefully, look at who's going to replace him on maybe a Kogi. Could be a quick thing just for the Minnesota if he gets minutes. But otherwise, look, there's heaps of other guys in the waiver wire. But that's something to be active about. When there's people being shut down like this, who's gonna obviously get the minutes? Pick them up.
Yeah, prioritize on your IR spots the player who's going to return the soonest. Not necessarily the best player. Even someone like a LeBron James, like he's going to be out for a little while, and if you're in a really tight spot, a player like that is expendable because it's do or die in the playoffs. So I wouldn't be afraid to sort of pull the trigger. I'm not saying you drop LeBron. If you can stash him on IR, please do so. But if you've got an injury list piling up and you've got a couple of players who are maybe coming back in a couple of games or so, they're going to be a priority to keep over someone who's out for weeks.